$15 billion. That is how much money Dwayne Johnson's films have made worldwide across his entire career. He is one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood history. Studios hand him budgets the size of small countries and expect him to deliver. Sometimes he doesn't. And when Dwayne Johnson bombs, he bombs spectacularly. We are talking about films that lost tens of millions of dollars, films that critics destroyed, films that audiences ignored completely. But here is what nobody tells you. Some of those films were actually good. Some of them were genuinely entertaining, surprisingly emotional, or just flat-out fun in ways that the box office numbers will never reflect. Today, America's vault is cracking open the vault on Dwayne Johnson's biggest commercial failures and asking the question that matters most. Not did it make money, but was it actually worth watching? These are the top 10 Dwayne Johnson box office flops that were actually great. Let's go. Number 10. Tooth Fairy, 2010. Budget, $48 million. Box office, $112 million. Verdict, modest earner, critically destroyed. We are starting with the one everyone uses to make fun of Dwayne Johnson's early career. The one where The Rock, the most physically imposing man in Hollywood, wore pink fairy wings and flew around granting children their wishes. Critics were merciless. Audiences who expected action stayed away. The film made its money back but barely, and the reviews were so brutal that Tooth Fairy became shorthand for selling out in Hollywood. But here is the truth. Tooth Fairy is genuinely funny. Johnson's complete commitment to the absurdity of the premise, never winking at the camera, never acknowledging how ridiculous he looks, is exactly what makes it work. He plays Derek Thompson, a hockey player cursed to become a real Tooth Fairy, with the same intensity he brings to action roles. The physical comedy is sharp. The family dynamics are warmer than you expect. And Johnson's willingness to be completely undignified in pursuit of a laugh showed a self-awareness that his later franchise work sometimes forgot. He was never too big to be silly. That is actually a rare quality in a movie star. Tooth Fairy is not a great film. But it is a genuinely enjoyable one that got buried under a reputation it only half deserved. Number 9. Planet 51, 2009. Budget, $70 million. Box office, $42 million. Verdict, full box office loss. Planet 51 lost nearly $30 million at the box office and is remembered today almost exclusively as a footnote in Johnson's filmography. The animated film tells the story of an American astronaut who lands on an alien planet and discovers the aliens are living exactly like 1950s America. Except to them, he is the monster. The concept is genuinely clever. The entire film is a loving parody of 1950s American science fiction. Cold War paranoia and suburban conformity, but told from the perspective of the aliens who are terrified of the human invader rather than the other way around. Johnson voices the astronaut Chuck Baker with perfect comedic timing, cocky, charming, completely unprepared to be the villain of someone else's story. The role works precisely because Johnson's natural charisma makes you root for Chuck even when Chuck is objectively the problem. Planet 51 failed because it was marketed poorly and released in a crowded animated landscape without the Disney or Pixar brand to back it up. But the core concept is smarter than almost any animated film that year, and Johnson's voice performance is one of the most purely fun things he has ever recorded. Number 8. Central Intelligence, 2016. Budget, $50 million. Box office, $217 million. Verdict, hit by numbers, ignored by critics. Technically, Central Intelligence made money, $217 million worldwide. But critics largely dismissed it as a forgettable buddy comedy, and it has been almost completely forgotten in conversations about Johnson's filmography. That is a mistake. Central Intelligence pairs Johnson with Kevin Hart in a genuine odd couple comedy. Johnson plays Bob Stone, a former bullied teenager who grew up to become a CIA operative and reconnects with the only person who was ever kind to him in high school. Hart plays the accountant who has to figure out if his old classmate is a hero or a traitor. What makes this film work beyond the obvious chemistry between its two leads is the surprisingly sincere treatment of bullying and self-worth underneath the comedy. Bob Stone's entire arc is about a man who spent his entire adult life building his body into a weapon because his body was used against him as a child. Johnson plays those emotional beats with a vulnerability that is easy to miss because the film surrounds them with jokes. But the vulnerability is there. And it makes Central Intelligence a considerably warmer film than its reputation suggests. Number 7. Skyscraper, 2018. Budget, $125 million. Box office, $304 million. Verdict, profitable but dismissed as generic. Skyscraper made $300 million worldwide and still got dismissed as a die-hard knockoff that nobody needed. Critics called it derivative, audiences went but didn't talk about it afterward. It came and went without leaving much of a mark. Which is genuinely unfair because Skyscraper does something almost no Dwayne Johnson movie had done before it. It gives him a physical limitation and forces the story to work around it. Johnson plays Will Sawyer, a former FBI operative and amputee who now works private security. His prosthetic leg is not a throwaway detail. The film builds multiple action sequences specifically around the reality of what a man with one leg can and cannot do in a burning building. The set pieces are inventive precisely because they had to solve a problem most action films never even create. The Hong Kong setting is visually spectacular. The family stakes, Johnson's character fighting to save his wife and children trapped inside, give the action genuine emotional weight. And Johnson's physical performance, navigating extreme situations with one prosthetic leg, is more athletically impressive than anything in most of his more celebrated films. Skyscraper deserved a better critical reception. And it earned one. Number 6. Hercules, 2014. Budget, $100 million. Box office, $244 million. Verdict, profitable but critically ignored. Hercules made money but nobody remembers it. It sits in that uncomfortable middle zone of Johnson's filmography. Not a hit big enough to generate franchise sequels, not a bomb dramatic enough to generate interesting conversation. But here is what Hercules got completely right that almost no other mythological epic has managed. The film asks a genuinely interesting question. What if Hercules was not actually a demigod? What if the 12 labors were not supernatural achievements but instead the carefully constructed legend of a very strong, very smart man who understood the power of mythology as a tool for intimidating enemies? Johnson plays Hercules as a mercenary who has allowed his legend to grow beyond the truth, and then has to decide whether he will live up to a myth he knows is partly fabricated. That is a compelling dramatic premise dressed up in action movie clothes. The battle sequences are enormous and well executed. Johnson's physical presence is at its most imposing, and the moral complexity at the center, a hero questioning whether his heroism is real, gives the film a weight that its modest reputation completely ignores. Number 5. Baywatch, 2017. Budget, $69 million. Box office, $177 million. Verdict, critical disaster, audience guilty pleasure. Baywatch has a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics called it lazy, crude, and a shameless cash grab on a television property nobody asked to see on the big screen. By almost every critical measure, it is one of the worst films Dwayne Johnson has ever made. And yet, Baywatch has a 61% audience score. People who actually watched it, without critic expectations weighing on their judgment, largely had a good time. The film knows exactly what it is, a ridiculous, sun-drenched, self-aware comedy that never takes itself seriously for a single second. Johnson and Zac Efron have genuine comedic chemistry. The film's endless parade of jokes about Johnson's physical perfection and Efron's competitive insecurity lands more often than critics admitted. And the Miami Beach setting gives the whole thing an energy and color that makes it impossible to fully hate. Baywatch failed because it was sold as something smarter than it was. Watched as a pure switch-your-brain-off comedy with two genuinely likable leads, it is considerably more entertaining than a 19% suggests. Sometimes critics and audiences are measuring completely different films. Number 4. Jungle Cruise, 2021. Budget, $200 million. Box office, $220 million. Verdict, COVID-era casualty, genuine crowd pleaser. Jungle Cruise had the worst possible release circumstances of any film on this list. It opened simultaneously in theaters and on Disney as a premium rental during the height of COVID uncertainty in 2021. Theaters were still operating at reduced capacity in many markets. Families were still cautious about going out. Against that backdrop, it still made $220 million worldwide and got written off as a disappointment. The film itself is a genuinely delightful adventure, a spiritual successor to the classic Disney adventure films of the 1980s. Johnson plays Frank Wolf, a riverboat captain in 1916 Amazon, Brazil, who guides a botanist played by Emily Blunt deep into the jungle in search of a legendary healing tree. The chemistry between Johnson and Blunt is the best of his entire career. Blunt matches him completely, sharp, funny, physically committed, and absolutely refusing to be outshone. Their bickering dynamic generates real warmth that carries the film through its more fantastical third act. Released under normal circumstances, Jungle Cruise would have been a genuine blockbuster. Instead, COVID turned it into a footnote. That is a genuine injustice to a film that earned a much bigger audience than it got. Number 3. Gridiron Gang, 2006. Budget, $30 million. Box office, $41 million. Verdict, barely broke even, quickly forgotten. In 2006, Dwayne Johnson tried something genuinely brave. He made a serious sports drama, no explosions, no superpowers, no comedic sidekick, about a probation officer who starts a football team inside a juvenile detention facility to give incarcerated teenagers a reason to believe in their own futures. The film is based on the true story of Sean Porter and the Kilpatrick Mustangs program in California. It is a story about what happens to young men when society gives up on them, and what one person willing to refuse that verdict can do. Johnson is extraordinary here. Warm, frustrated, determined, and human in ways that his action films never required. He plays Sean Porter as a man driven not by heroism but by a simple refusal to accept that these teenagers are already lost. The young actors playing the incarcerated players are remarkable, raw and authentic in a way that big-budget productions rarely achieve. Their performances ground the film in a reality that prevents it from becoming sentimental. Gridiron Gang flopped because sports dramas were oversaturated in 2006 and audiences were exhausted by the formula. Removed from that context, it is one of the most genuinely moving films Johnson has ever been part of. Number 2. Black Adam, 2022. Budget, $260 million. Box office, $393 million. Verdict, franchise killer that was better than its legacy suggests. Black Adam is one of the most expensive failures in recent Hollywood history. $393 million sounds impressive until you account for the production budget of $260 million and a marketing spend that pushed the real cost closer to $400 million. The film almost certainly lost money, and it effectively ended Johnson's ambitions to reshape the DC universe. But strip away the franchise baggage and the financial disappointment and ask one simple question: is it a good film? More than it gets credit for. Johnson's portrayal of Teth Adam, an ancient antihero from Kahndaq who was enslaved, gained supernatural power, and used it to burn oppressors rather than inspire followers, is genuinely compelling. This is not a hero who wants to be celebrated. This is a man who was broken by power and chose destruction over hope. The Justice Society scenes crackle with genuine energy. Aldous Hodge as Hawkman delivers one of the most underappreciated superhero performances of the decade. And the film's central moral question, what separates a hero from a villain when both are willing to use violence without restraint, is more philosophically interesting than the majority of superhero films that made 10 times its box office return. Black Adam deserved to be the beginning of something. It became an ending instead. But the film itself is better than the story of its failure suggests. Number 1. Red 1, 2024. Budget, $250 million. Box office, $185 million. Verdict, biggest financial loss of Johnson's career. $250 million budget. $185 million worldwide. Red 1 lost more money in absolute terms than any film Dwayne Johnson has ever made. It is the defining commercial failure of his recent career, the film that made studios and analysts seriously question whether The Rock can still open a movie on his own. And here is the thing that all those box office conversations completely buried. Audiences loved it. Red One has a 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. A cinema score of A-. The people who actually sat down and watched a story about the head of North Pole Security teaming up with a cynical bounty hunter, played with effortless charisma by Chris Evans, to rescue a kidnapped Santa Claus had an absolutely wonderful time. The film is fun in a way that big-budget Hollywood has largely forgotten how to be. It is inventive, colorful, genuinely funny, and built around the kind of practical Christmas movie magic that made films like The Santa Claus and Elf into beloved classics. Johnson and Evans have the best chemistry of any duo Johnson has been paired with in years. Evans's sardonic energy is the perfect counterweight to Johnson's relentless optimism. Why did it fail? The budget was catastrophically oversized for what the film was. The marketing was confused, and Johnson's recent box office cold streak made studios nervous, leading to a release strategy that never gave the film room to breathe and build word of mouth. But here is what matters now. Red One found its audience on streaming. It climbed the Prime Video charts immediately after its streaming release and stayed there. The people are watching it and the people are enjoying it. The box office told one story about Red One. The audience is writing a completely different one. And that audience is right. Here is what every film on this list has in common. They were judged by a number. Opening weekend. Budget versus gross. Return on investment. Hollywood reduced them to a calculation, and when the calculation came back wrong, the films were buried. But films are not calculations. They are experiences. And the experience of watching Dwayne Johnson commit completely to fairy wings, or find genuine vulnerability inside a bullying storyline, or carry a Christmas movie with the kind of joy that big-budget filmmaking usually squeezes out. Those experiences do not show up on a spreadsheet. Box office tells you what happened on opening weekend. It does not tell you what a film is worth. These 10 films were worth more than their numbers suggest. And if you have never seen them or dismissed them based on their reputation, consider this your invitation to look again. Drop a comment below. Which one of these surprised you most? And which Dwayne Johnson flop do you think the world completely got wrong? Subscribe to America's Vault. We unveil hidden performances and what got left behind. Every single week. See you in the next one.